Good morning, students. Welcome to this e-class of BND Government Arts College, Chimanpura. I'm Dr. Ekta Goswami, and in this class of BA Part First, Paper First, we would take up for discussion Shakespearean Sonnet. The syllabus of BA Part First begins up with Shakespearean sonnets. The first three poems prescribed in your syllabus, Shall I Compare Thee, Not Marble Nor the Gilded Monuments, and Remembrance, are all Shakespearean sonnets. In the earlier classes, we had discussed about sonnets, and in this class, we would take up the significant and distinguishing qualities of Shakespearean sonnet. Shakespearean sonnets are poems that William Shakespeare wrote on a variety of themes. But while discussing or while talking about Shakespearean sonnets, we always refer to the 154 sonnets, which are like a sequence, which are like a series that Shakespeare has written. And they were all published together in a quarto in 1609. We had discussed in the earlier class that the sonnet is a poem of 14 lines. So Shakespearean sonnet, it is also a 14-line poem, and the stylistic form of the English sonnet, the rhyme scheme, the 14 lines, and the meter, they are all observed by Shakespeare. Shakespearean sonnets, they are a continuation of the sonnet tradition which began in Italy and which was made famous by Petrarch in the 14th century Italy. Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, Earl of Surrey, they brought the sonnet form into England, and Shakespearean sonnet observes the form of this English form of sonnets. But instead of expressing love for a woman, which was the subject of these sonnets by Petrarch and the sonnets of Thomas Wyatt and Surrey, Shakespeare introduces a young man. He introduces the dark lady, and he explores various themes in his sonnets, which actually was a new tradition in sonnets. Shakespearean sonnets, if we take up the form, they are the 14 lines which are divided into 4 stanzas and a couplet, means 3 quatrains and a couplet. Quatrains are a set of 4 lines and couplet is a set of 2 lines. And there are typically 10 syllables per line which are phrased in iambic pentameter. So the question arises, was Shakespeare the originator of sonnets? The answer is no. Shakespeare was not the first English poet who wrote sonnets for the first time. Before Shakespeare, sonnets were already being written in English literature. In fact, English poets were writing sonnets for nearly a century before Shakespeare. The Italian sonnet form, it was introduced to England by Sir Thomas Wyatt and Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, who was the author of the sonnets and the 3 quatrains and a couplet. This form of sonnet was introduced to England by Wyatt and Surrey, which was later adopted by Shakespeare. The primary source of Shakespeare's sonnets is a quarto published in 1609 titled Shakespeare's Sonnets. Now, what is a quarto? The word quarto comes from Latin quartus, which means 1/4, and quarto was the printing of 8 pages in a single sheet of paper, 4 to a side, then folded twice to produce 4 leaves. So it was smaller in size, and it contained, means Shakespeare's quarto of sonnets, it contained 154 sonnets, which are followed by the long poem A Lover's Complaint. They were first printed as a sequence in 1609 with a mysterious dedication to Mr. W.H. and to a dark lady. As the traditional subject of sonnet was love, so the main concern of Shakespeare's sonnet is love. But they also reflect upon time, change, aging, lust, absence, and infidelity. When analyzed as characters, the subject of the sonnets are usually referred to as the fair youth, the rival poet, and a dark lady. The speaker, he expresses admiration for the fair youth's beauty. Sonnets 1 to 126 seem to be addressed to a young man who is generally considered to be socially superior to the speaker. If we read the sonnets in a chronological order as published, the speaker later has an affair with the dark lady. Sonnet 127 to 152 seem to be addressed to a woman, the so-called dark lady of Shakespearean legend, who later has an affair with the fair youth. So the woman is elusive, often tyrannous, and causes the speaker great pain and shame. It is not known whether the poems and their characters, they are fiction or they are autobiographical. But because they are written in a series, so the scholars, they have attempted to identify the characters with historical individuals. The two final sonnets, Sonnet 153 and Sonnet 154, focus on the classical god Cupid. Shakespeare has dedicated his sonnets to Mr. W.H. The identity of Mr. W.H. is not known for certain. His identity has been the subject of great amount of speculation. Speculations are for William Herbert, the Earl of Pembroke. He is seen as perhaps the most likely identity of Mr. W.H. and the young man. Henry Wriothesley, with initials reversed, has received a great deal of consideration as the possible Mr. W.H. The reason is for the description of the physical features and the personality, age, they might match the young man in the sonnets. Speculations are also for William Hall, a printer who had worked with Thorpe, William Harvey, Southampton's stepfather, William Houghton, a contemporary dramatist, William Hart, Shakespeare's nephew and male heir, William Hugh, the 18th century scholar. So speculations are among the scholars for the possible Mr. W.H. If we analyze Shakespearean sonnets as the characters, the subject of the sonnets are usually referred to as the fair youth, the rival poet, and the dark lady. The dark lady sequence means sonnets 127 to 152. It distinguishes itself from the fair youth sequence. The dark lady is so called because she has black hair and dark skin. The dark lady suddenly appears and she and the speaker of the sonnets, the poet, they are in a relationship. And she does not prove to be loyal and she is diverted towards the fair youth, and the promiscuity in the character of the dark lady is highlighted. The rival poet mentioned in Shakespearean sonnets, the identity of the rival poet, it also remains a mystery. So, rival poet can be Marlowe, who was the most popular poet during that time. It can be Ben Jonson, it can be Daniel, it can be John Davis. So it, the speculation goes on whether the fair youth, the dark lady, the rival poet for whom Shakespeare has written sonnets in a sequence, whether they are the real characters or whether they are imaginary. So, what are the titles of these sonnets? Do Shakespeare's sonnets have titles? No. None of Shakespeare's sonnets have titles, so we refer to them by numbers or the first line of the sonnet. So the number of these sonnets or the first line of the sonnet, they are the titles of Shakespeare's sonnets. These numbers, they come from the order in which the poems were first published in 1609. The order of the sonnets is significant as it weaves the sonnets in a sequence. In your syllabus, there are 3 Shakespearean sonnets which is prescribed. Shall I compare thee? Not marble, not the gilded monuments, and remembrance. These 3 sonnets are prescribed in your syllabus, which we would discuss in your next class. So enjoy and build up an understanding through your reading of Shakespearean sonnets.